Hey, I'm Calvin Zito, used to be known as the HPE storage guy. I am the storage godfather, and we're going to get going in just a minute here. But before we do, I wanted to make sure I give you some URLs and places where you can find more of our content around HPE storage. First is our blog, hpe.com/storage/blog. You can always reach out to me directly on Twitter, and I'm always happy to chat with people. Where you can find me as Calvin Zito. I've got a URL there for where you can find a playlist of all my videos that includes demos, chalk talks, and Q&A style things that I've done. And then I've got some instructions how you can find my podcast, which is basically just go to either iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and Spotify and search for Around the Storage Block and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll get going here in just a second. Hi, everyone. I'm Calvin Zito. I am the storage godfather. I've been at HPE Storage for a long time, and welcome to our session today here at the CTO Advisor virtual event. With us, our main presenter is Patrick Osborne. Patrick, you've been a part of HPE Storage for a long, long time too. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background and what you're doing at HPE Storage?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Calvin. My name is Patrick Osborne. I am VP and General Manager for our hyper-converged infrastructure business here at HPE. Calvin said I've been in the storage industry for well over 20 years. I have a lot of experience in primary storage, secondary storage, big data analytics, and now the exciting world of HCI. So it's been quite a journey.
So you, Patrick, you're doing a session today talking about living on the edge. Without jumping into too much detail too quickly, but why did you pick that as a topic here?
So I think one of the things we've observed with a number of our customers recently is that there is an intersection between HCI as a technology and where some of these workloads are being deployed. And they're not necessarily in the traditional data center and not necessarily running in the cloud, but they're being implemented at what people are calling the edge.
So maybe let's define that a little bit more. What is the edge? Is it a physical location? Is it a virtual location? What do we really mean when we talk about the edge?
Yeah, so for a lot of customers, it's essentially a physical location where things and people connect, right? So we've got a lot of great use cases with Edge and or Aruba Wireless, right? We have a lot of really cool things like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and the new stadium for the Warriors, and places like some fantastic airport experiences. So anywhere where people are essentially looking for richer services, but they're not necessarily right in the data center, is where we see a number of these edge workloads being deployed, and they're growing very quickly.
So speaking of edge workloads, what are we actually talking about when we talk about workloads? What kind of things are people running at the edge, and what maybe are some of the emerging applications that people will be running at the edge?
Yeah, so we see a couple different patterns, right? We see things like multi-site and connected systems, right? So when you think about someone like a very large retail chain, right? They have a lot of distributed systems that run in the stores, or something like a grocery store chain. Places where you want to get these workloads very close to customers and remote sites. So one of the big workloads that we're seeing is around video and vision. At the end of the day, so you can give fans a better experience and different sort of new ways to serve up these workloads that are going to be like directly interacting with some of these new customer experiences that you're using to augment actually reality. We're seeing a lot of things around autonomous services. So whether it's autonomous cars or autonomous drilling platforms. So being able to have those services that are out, sometimes those are very data heavy. So being able to bring the data back to the data center is not an option, for these workloads. And we're also seeing areas where maybe the network isn't great, so you want to be able to run these services in a disconnected manner, right? So you wouldn't be able to get from your edge to the cloud or edge to the data center. It's a very lossy, networking protocol, and you want to be able to run those. So we're seeing lots of areas where those are some of the key use cases. Sometimes those will be implemented in you'll run those applications in virtual machines. Also, we're starting to see the need for running some of these applications, especially AI and analytics in containers. So lots of really interesting things coming around these new patterns.
So one of the things I want you to kind of talk about, because customers are always looking at how do you help solve my challenges, is what are the challenges that people have around the edge, or in what I think I hear you describing as a distributed enterprise? What are the challenges they're facing?
So a couple of the challenges that we see are certainly data growth. That's always, an issue for our customers. No matter if they're running in the traditional data center or at the edge. So you have to be very efficient in how you store the data, and also be very efficient on how you move data back and forth, and how you can do that for not only things like DR and backup, but just in terms of site and application federation. So that's definitely one of the areas, and then certainly complexity. So in a lot of locations like this, you're not going to have a very expert-driven, trained IT staff. So a lot of these things need to be, super easy to implement, right? So, come out of the box, unbox it, plug it in, you get your network, and then it calls back to the cloud, and you have a very easy deployment experience, and a very easy, management experience over time. So you want to have a really good customer experience, and you want to avoid any complexity. And then also managing it at scale, right? So a lot of these are distributed systems, right? Tens, hundreds, thousands of sites. And so being able to have a global view of all that infrastructure from a simplicity standpoint is definitely, it's a huge requirement, because you want to be able to manage those systems with essentially zero on-site IT staff.
So let's talk a little bit more then about what kind of solution we're talking about. And I don't want to turn this into a deep dive into technology or our products, but we're talking about hyperconverged and why hyperconverged is ideal for the edge. What is it about hyperconverged that makes it a good solution for the edge?
Well, I think a couple of things that are endemic to the HCI architecture are really important, right? It's simple, right? Easy to deploy, easy to manage. It's all in one, and the fact that you can consolidate a number of different layers, compute, networking, and storage into essentially into a standard industry standard server form factor. A lot of the things that come with HCI around, very easy administration, and built-in powerful data services are things that really lend itself to being able to run in these, 2-4 node configurations, running in these, data centers, micro data centers, computer rooms, and then being able to manage them at scale from a federated management perspective. And then, so one of the things that we also provide at HPE, which I think is, we're pretty famous for, is around InfoSight. And then, allowing us to essentially manage these systems through, millions of points of telemetry, and using, techniques like AI ops and predictive analytics, reduce the burden of administration on these systems.
Well, let's dive a little bit deeper on InfoSight. From the storage perspective, that we brought InfoSight in when we acquired Nimble Storage a few years ago. Nimble's been around for about 10 years, doing all of this work around gathering from all the units in the field and getting all this intelligence. What is it that sets InfoSight apart? Because, other people have this kind of intelligence that they're talking about. What is it that's going to make this so different, especially as you look at your portfolio with HPE SimpliVity?
Yeah, I think the things that really bring a game changer to for this tech. Even if you look at the investments lately from a venture capitalist perspective, many people are investing in AI ops, machine learning, and we have one of the best platforms in the industry for this. So this is definitely a key trend on how to essentially invest and get into the hands of customers things around support automation, predictive analytics, and AI ops, such that we can almost run their infrastructure for them autonomously. And so and this becomes very important in a very large distributed environment that's running at the edge, where you're not going to have trained IT staff, dedicated people to do storage. You're more worried about plugging into an existing infrastructure and providing a new set of services. And so for us, it allows us to, essentially really, really reduce the amount of support calls, human interaction with the platform, such that we can manage that for customers and manage it for them at scale. and give them a global view of all their assets. And at the end of the day, what people really love about it is around support automation. We often quote, over 96% of these cases are closed automatically, and that puts that releases a lot of IT staff to go do other things. And so for us, it's all about unlocking the scale of these solutions through something, a very powerful platform like InfoSight.
So let me ask you another question about SimpliVity and where SimpliVity plays in this. I mean, you talked about kind of helping reduce that complexity. What is it about SimpliVity? I mean, it's the all-in-one system, and it can be managed by somebody who's not an expert. But what really at the heart of this is makes it such a great solution for the edge?
So I think for edge infrastructure, we kind of laid out what some of the requirements are, and the fact that it's a all-in-one system that is going to give you all of the things you need, right? It's going to give you the compute with your hypervisor. You can actually run hypervisors with containers today on SimpliVity. So if you want to take a look at some of those architectures running VMs and containers side by side, it's going to bring you your switching technology, your HA, very resilient shared of data storage. It's also going to provide you built-in backup, deduplication, and DR, right, which is super important for these environments because a lot of them are going to be either edge to edge or edge to core or even edge to core to cloud. And that is going to provide you things like WAN optimization, caching, other sorts of things that really matter as you have a distributed environment. It's very secure. We have a ton of security capabilities built into the platform, as well as on-premises and off-premises monitoring with InfoSight. So all of that in a very dense platform that's easy to scale. So you can start off with 2 nodes and you can scale that out horizontally. And that's obviously the beauty of HCI. So that's going to essentially collapse all those silos, give you the footprint that you need with the data services that you need. You don't need specialists from an administration perspective. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to the lowest dollar per workload for these workloads that are running on the system. And so HCI is a great platform for that.
I know you're out there talking to customers all the time. Maybe help us understand a customer that you've been talking to that had challenges that they've gone to SimpliVity and it's really helped them address what it is they're trying to do.
Yeah, so if you think about a vertical like retail, right? It's changing very quickly. So we have a very large retailer that is using SimpliVity and HCI at the edge. They are using it in their stores to not only do things like collapse the stack that runs a number of their traditional applications, right? You think about something like their point of sale applications, database, Active Directory, things that you'd need to run a very large store, as well as some of their own custom applications. But then giving them the ability to deploy new workloads that changes the customer experience within the store itself, right? So you can think about things like AR, video, things that they are probably planning for, like most retailers, different checkout experiences, things of that nature. So it just changes the game for them in terms of how they interact with their customers while they're in the store. And then you marry that with some of the great things that we've done with, the Aruba wireless platform. It essentially gives you a whole new way of interacting with your customers when they're in an environment that is, quote unquote, at the edge. And so for us, it's an ability to, provide that infrastructure for them at scale for tens, hundreds, and planning on thousands of sites. It's pretty exciting.
Well, let me encourage people who are watching this during the virtual event. We do have a booth. We have a bunch of experts in our booth. And if you want to come over to our HPE SimpliVity booth, we've got experts in the booth that can help answer questions. So come on over to our booth and let's talk about what your requirements are and see if HPE SimpliVity can help. Patrick, I really appreciate the time you spent today. For people that want to learn more, we also want to point them to where they can find it on our website. You can go to hpe.com/SimpliVity. Easy to remember. So again, Patrick, thanks for the time today. Stay safe and healthy.
All right, you too. Thanks everyone out there for attending today's conference, and we look forward to interacting with you in the near future. Thank you.